The RMB has increasingly come into far greater focus by not the traditional trade partners of Western Europe and the United States, but throughout what is referred to as the Global South. And the Global South is essentially all of the countries that are throughout Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the like. And there's been a concern over the last 3 to 4 years that the US dollar has been weaponized. And what do I mean by weaponized? At the onset of the Ukrainian war with Russia, the Americans decided that they were going to freeze the Russian assets that were denominated, meaning based on the US dollar. All of those assets were in the US system. They were frozen, essentially stolen, if you will, by the Americans from the Russian government. This then began a conversation throughout the Global South of how can countries begin to diversify, to reduce their risk, to having a similar outcome happen in a future time. And that is where the RMB began to rise, if you will, as being used in trade. So again, if you look at trade again in oil, what you've actually seen this year is an increase by the Chinese, let's say, to use RMB to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. Now, that's useful. That is, as I've mentioned in previous videos, the use of the currency to allow for trade, to buy back and forth. But here is the fascinating aspect of what China has been doing with the RMB. Saudi Arabia, at the end of a given year or end of a given month, whatever the case might be, will have a lot of RMB. They don't need RMB. They'll trade with China, but they trade far more oil than what they need from China. So ultimately, they will have, in Saudi Arabia, a surplus of RMB. What do they do with that? Well, they come back to China and they buy gold. China has opened up the Shanghai International Gold Exchange and allows for what is called physical settlement. Physical settlement is critical when you look at how you internationalize a currency. So the Saudi Arabia government can come over with the RMB, they can provide the RMB to the Shanghai government, or China in general, and they can receive actual physical bars of gold that they then send back to Saudi Arabia. This completely reduces the risk that the Russians incurred at the onset of the Ukrainian conflict. No one can take your bars of gold. You can have the American government take your government bonds, your reserve asset. But this has been the real solution. So it's not just that the RMB is being used as a medium of exchange, the ability to transact between countries. It's that China was so smart to then fix the issue of reserve asset by making physical delivery and actual settlement in gold take place here in Shanghai. And strangely enough, nobody really knows that this is going on outside of a small group of people in the industry.